Alright, so I want to make a video updating everyone as usual, getting right into it. Alberta, 50 new cases yesterday. Um, Canada, 98,460 confirmed cases, 8,107 dead. I think we are around 331,000 for tests completed. So again, we tested over 8,000 people yesterday. We had 50 new cases. People are up in arms about we're having this big, massive second wave, and it isn't this big, massive second wave. I think the numbers bear out that, it isn't big and massive by definition. We're continuing to increase our testing, and the other thing to point out too is that the hospitalization numbers are not going up. They're hovering in that 40 to 50 range. They've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So it is very obvious that we are catching people that were largely asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms. Because if we had this big, massive spike in cases and it was a threat, an actual threat we should be worried about, we should see the hospital numbers go up, and we haven't seen that. So I think it's pretty clear that we're literally just seeing, because of the increased testing and because the government has allowed just anybody who wants to go get a test to go get a test, we're seeing an increase in numbers. And again, literally like the day they announced that anyone can go get a test, like within a day or two, we did see an increase. Like we seen like what, 7 people, then within a few days anyone can go get a test, and then the cases are back up to like 30, 40. We had 50 yesterday. So that is one of the main reasons. I think the numbers bear that out as well when you compare it to the US. So I've never talked about this, but these are the US numbers, and you look at the curve here, and it is very flat. Now, the first thing to point out is that the George Floyd protests slash riots have been going on for, I believe, 2 weeks, maybe even a little over that. I think he died on, I think it was May 30th, I believe, and it's June 15th, and so we're talking over 2 weeks, and yet still no uptick in cases. If there was going to be an uptick in cases, we would have seen it by now. The numbers are clearly very steady. I mean, you look at the numbers around when let's look at the May 30th, they had 23,500 cases. May 31st, 26,177 cases. And over the last few days in the States, we're looking at 22,000, 21,000, 25,000. So again, there's no uptick in cases. Now, again, the problem with places like Alberta is a much smaller sample size. The US has over 300 million people. The protests happen on a much larger scale in the States, and yet there's still no uptake. So this is confirmation beyond a shadow of a doubt that the lockdowns do not work. They do not work whatsoever. And like I say, the numbers clearly bear that out. The numbers clearly bear that out. And anybody still supporting at this time, it's just a classic case. You hear it talked about constantly when it comes to politics and psychology, that when people have a worldview and evidence comes out that disproves that worldview, they tend to just double down. And you see that. And I seen a post today on Reddit about how a guy posted, and it was actually very popular because it wasn't on a super big page. There was hundreds of likes for it, which again I think is just more evidence that proves my point. Is um, he said something along the lines of, almost all the people I talk to in my personal life think that the lockdowns are a scam, but most of the people on here are think that it isn't. They think it's this big issue, and it goes to show that most of these social media outlets tend to be echo chambers, and they tend to be to the left. And for the simple reason that the numbers bear that out. People on the left are much less likely to expose themselves to worldviews that don't adhere to their own. Again, the numbers clearly bear that out. And I think that's for obvious reasons, in that the people on the left tend to be people more swayed by emotion. Their beliefs tend to be not as backed up in fact, at least the economic ones. If you want to debate the religious aspects of that, go ahead. But the economic ones and all that kind of stuff, like, you can't be a socialist and expose yourselves to people who disagree with you politically and especially economically, because it's like being a flat earther and constantly exposing yourself to people who are like, earth scientists or whatever, people that clearly understand the earth is round. Like you just can't do it. Like it's like how, religious cults and cults in general tend to isolate you, because if you expose yourself to beliefs that differ from your own, you'll probably realize that you've been lied to. And that's the problem that with these leftist echo chambers, and that they don't expose themselves to beliefs that are different from their own, which in their mind just shows, hey, I am right. I'm going to continue to double down. And that's the problem. And you see pretty much everyone in the comments I've seen, one of the main comments was, yeah, I tend to be more a centrist or more on the right, and I've recognized, yeah, it's an echo chamber. Another big comment is Reddit. The problem is that the moderators will typically, at least in my experience, is almost always ban you if you question the narrative. And I don't see that difference. I don't see the difference on the right. Like when you go to a pro-gun page, they don't ban you, at least in my experiences, and from what I've seen people talk to. I've never seen anyone comment that if you come and challenge the narrative, because it's very easy to defeat the anti-gun argument. But the problem is that they don't have. It's the same reason why the left wants to ban free speech, is that if they don't have an argument against most of the right's arguments. So rather than trying to argue it, and the problem with that is that they can't argue it, so they just try and ban you so they don't have to argue it. And like I say, this is a perfect textbook example. If you're trying to talk to someone in history about an example of people not changing their mind as new evidence comes out, this is a textbook example, because um, like I say, it's a textbook example, because when we first got into this in March, we thought the death rate was around 5%. We thought that asymptomatic spread was common. We thought that it sits on surfaces for like 2 weeks and all this kind of stuff. And since that time, we found out, hey, the death rate is comparable to the flu, assuming you're under 65. And for I think it's under 30, it's even lower than the flu. We found out that, hey, asymptomatic spread is very rare. We found out it doesn't sit on surfaces nearly as long as we originally thought. So every new piece of evidence that has came out has proven that it is not nearly as bad as what we thought it was. And yet I've yet to see one of these pro-lockdown people in any comments or in person. Most of the people I know, like I say, it completely bears out that other guy's theory that, again, most of the people they know are completely against the lockdown. I think I know one person personally who's pro-lockdown, and there's someone who's generally paranoid about most things. But I go on social media and I talk to people, and again, you see a lot of people that are pro-lockdown. So again, it's the classic social media echo chamber. But again, it's the classic example of all the evidence that has came out has completely disproven it, yet I've yet to see someone admit, hey, I was wrong. And I said that too. Like off the start, I tacitly supported the lockdowns, but looking back, I was completely wrong about that. Now, the problem being is that the evidence, even at the time, I should have been more skeptical, but the evidence did show that it may have been a good idea to lock down for a short period of time. But if you'd have told me 4 months, maybe more, and the problem with that is 4 months straight up. We may be talking 6 months, a year, 2 years with heavy restrictions. So that is the problem, is that if you'd have told people that at the time, people would have been pretty mad. But anyway, again, this is just another thing I've been pointing out over and over again ad nauseum. And Sarah Gonzalez here responds to the NBC News, and she says they aren't even trying to hide the blatant hypocrisy anymore. And looking right into it, or pulling this tweet up here. So NBC News tweets, or they put out a story and say, President Trump plans to rally his supporters next Saturday for the first time since the country was shuttered by the virus, but health experts are questioning that decision. And then that was 6:13 p.m. on June 14th. And then where's the other story here? 4:50 p.m. So about an hour and 20, a little over an hour and 20 minutes. They post a story and say, Rally for Black Trans Lives draws packed crowd to Brooklyn Museum Plaza. Again, there was literally probably over 10,000, maybe 20, 30,000 people. Like there was a ton of people at this rally. And yet nobody cares. But God forbid Trump have a rally. Again, they aren't even hiding the hypocrisy anymore. It's blatantly obvious. It is blatantly obvious. And anybody who supports the lockdowns right now, unless you're up in arms about this kind of stuff, which you're not going to be because you're 99% of the people that they would be afraid to be called racist or sexist or transphobic or this phobic or that phobic. Unless you're willing to do that, then take a seat. Then take a seat because you don't actually have any morals, you don't have any values, you don't have anything. You're just virtue signaling. You don't actually care. You don't even believe in your own beliefs. That 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when or maybe it was a little more when they had that rally, the pro-gun rally in Alberta. You were the worst person ever for wanting to go to a protest. There was like what, maybe a couple hundred people there, and you were the worst person ever. You had Doug Ford in Toronto talking about that, all the people gathering at that park, which there wasn't that many people. There's maybe, I don't know, 500, 400. Like there wasn't that many, at least from what I've seen. And Doug Ford, oh, you're selfish. You're the worst person in the world. You're going to get people killed. But then, sure enough, again, these people just prove they have no morals, ethics, anything whatsoever. None whatsoever. And when it comes to the Doug Fords of the world, obviously he's not on the left. He's just afraid of being called racist and sexist and being attacked by the media. That's clearly what it is because he's blatantly wrong. Even at the time, I pointed that out. Even before the this kind of stuff broke out, I pointed out how stupid that was. So anyway, this is from Matt Walsh. Now, getting back into that story I brought up yesterday, the biggest things in the news, like in the virus, is kind of the second biggest story. This whole racism or lack thereof is kind of the biggest news in the news these days. And Matt Walsh says you should be able to assault a police officer, steal his taser, and fire it at him without getting shot. Is an incredible position and one that many people are actually taking. The world has collectively lost its mind. And again, this is the problem with the story is that these people are losing credibility. Like, if you want to protest against actual racism, be my guest. Hardly anyone is actually against that. The problem is that not only is it appearing like they don't want to discern the difference. Most of these people that I've, at least a lot of them I've seen interviewed, they don't see a difference between rioting and protesting. They don't see a difference between actual racism or actual police brutality and clearly justified police brutality. I mean, look at how much the hands up, don't shoot myth is still being perpetrated with Mike Brown. It was definitively proven that his hands weren't up and he attacked a police officer, and the police officer was perfectly justified in doing what he did. So again, if these people are going to continuously lump in clearly, or at least largely justified police shootings. I think this one's clearly a justified shooting. Again, if someone steals a weapon from you and tries to use it on you, you are perfectly justified in using lethal force. And I don't think anybody, they can say, oh, get up on their high horse and pretend that they don't believe that, but you're lying. You're just flat out lying because you need to put yourself in this person's shoes. If you were in their shoes, of course you would. Again, the guy was drunk too. Like, that's the problem. That's the problem. And it's just absolutely insane that this stuff is going on. This is from David Jacobs. Now, he's quoting a 22 minutes article or tweet, which is an affiliate of the CBC, I believe. And well, let's just pull it up here, actually. New report shows that when it comes to leadership in Canada's political parties aren't getting more diverse, and if it's even possible, the Conservatives seem to be getting paler. Now, again, um, they constantly criticize racism, but yet they're perfectly fine with being racist against whites. And they're completely ignoring that one of the leading candidates for the leadership of the Conservative Party is a black woman. Not only are they black, but they're also a woman. You got at least in the leftist eyes, a double minority going here, and yet they don't care. Like, what is going on? Like, again, it's just classic race baiting. Again, they have to maintain this fallacy and lie that conservatives are racists and right wingers are racists and we're not racist, even though the only group that supports, and again, I don't like being tribal, but being tribal is actually, when the reason for you being tribal is something that's true and obvious, I'm not against that. in the sense that the left is the only side that is literally supports racist laws. They're the only group that supports racist laws. Not only that, they're the only group in the past that has supported racist laws. I mean, it was the Democrats who supported slavery. It was the Democrats who argued against the civil rights bill. And there, again, the classic lie of history is the big switch, which is not a thing. It's not true. So again, and this is the other thing too with the whole bringing down statues and all this garbage, that if if we should be tearing down statues of all of people who supported slavery and racism, then why aren't we canceling the Democratic Party? Because they're the ones that supported it this whole time. They just changed their mind when they came up with the idea that we can, get votes for offering people free stuff. So again, it's just crazy. And again, it's just flat out race baiting. That's one of the main reasons that the media exists. Number one is that it benefits the left, and number two is that it's good for ratings. It's good. Like, these riots are great for ratings. Like, great. Again, the ratings are clearly going down because most people are recognizing that the virus is a complete and utter fraud, and a lot of people are going back to work. So again, that's just two things that are making people less likely to want to watch their garbage. So again, they some story that, again, there's no, I don't even know if there's definitive evidence that the cop in Minnesota was a racist. If any of these racist incidents that they're claiming are racist, if there's actually evidence that they're racist, they're just assuming they are, and because it's going to be great for ratings, they're just going along and just making stuff up. And the last thing I want to talk about, speaking of racist, here is an Edmonton Black Lives Matter event barred Alberta's Minister of Municipal Affairs, Casey Madu, from speaking at an anti-racism protest. Now, again, the reason that they banned him was he's a conservative. He's a conservative minister, and I've been saying it all along that Black Lives Matter is not about equality. Black Lives Matter is surely a political movement to benefit the left. I'm going to make a video about it coming up that definitively proves that. But even if that you don't see, even if you don't have the hard evidence, it's beyond obvious looking at it from an objective perspective that um, the people are overwhelmingly Democrat. They're literally donating money to Democrats. Like, come on, there's overwhelming amount of evidence here. And like I say, I'm gonna make a video about that, so stay tuned for that. But again, if they actually care about Black lives, they wouldn't completely ignore the Black lives that disagree with them politically. Look at how they treat people like Candace Owens. Look at how they treat people like Kanye West, Brandon Tatum, these kind of people for questioning the left's, chokehold on the black vote. Look at how they treat these people. They call them the worst words in the world. Like, they literally call Candace Owens a white supremacist when she's black. Like, again, it just goes to show just how crazy and stupid these people are. So anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. If you like to, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last couple of things, as always, check me out on Twitter if you haven't already, and check me out on BitChute. All the links are in the description, so you can find them all there.